Oh, Amiya. Hello, everybody. This is your Dream Even. Let me make this chat a little bigger. Dream Even Spider Mama Amiya Aranha. Hello. I got a new what's the word? The chat overlay is less clashing with the rest of what I got going on. Nice chat overlay. Yeah, I just picked up one from Booth for now. Just for this layout. Don't be scared. It's okay, guys. It's just a little couple of little spooky stories, you know? Nothing crazy. Sorry, I have the just woke up phlegms. Although I didn't just wake up, but you know how it is. I also just ate, so So we're gonna read some more Lovecraft today. And I have a thing to help me with pronunciation. I have a little add-on. I'll demonstrate it for you guys. Hold on. I got warm up. Four words in Lovecraft already dropping the word gods. The gods. What was I gonna say? Oh, and I have 3 stories today, and they're all on the shorter side, so hopefully I can get through them all, you know? But listen to this.
Apropos.
Because last time there was a lot of words I did not know how to pronounce, so... What about this one? Thenceforth. John Madden. Spooky Lovecraft, excellent. The Violet Queen reads about the Yellow King and stuff. Sure. Ayo. What about, let's see here. Ayo. Rain, thanks for the 39 months. Ayo. Oh, and this was the one. Pentelicus. Oh, I spelled it wrong earlier.
Pentelicus.
Oh, Pentelicus. Pentelicus. And then, what else?
Hellas.
Hella. That's hella cool. Do you guys remember that little piece of slang? Anyway, we're gonna start with this one. Hypnos by H.P. Lovecraft, of course. Can you change the language and make the robot say things funny? No, I don't think you can change anything. I think it's just a little extension. People in chat will notice mistakes because I'll be like, Pentelicus? The King in Yellow actually also is technically part of the Carcosa mythos. Is that not Lovecraft? Okay, let's listen. 2SL, I wonder who that is. Apropos of sleep, that sinister adventure of all our nights. We may say that men go to bed daily with an audacity that would be incomprehensible if we did not know that it is a result of the ignorance of the danger. Baudelaire. Stir is referenced by Lovecraft. Some people say it's separate. King Yellow is not Lovecraft, but he referenced it a few times. Okay. The BGM could be lower for reading along. Sure. Is that a little bit better, maybe? It's a collection of short stories by Robert W. Chambers about a play that drives people insane. Oh my god, this like, what is it, Macbeth? That has that myth about it. Okay. Let's go. May the merciful gods, if indeed there be such, guard those hours when no power of the will or drug that the cunning man devises can keep me from the chasm of sleep. Death is merciful, for there is no return therefrom. But with him who has come back out of the nethermost chambers of the night, haggard and gnawing, peace rests nevermore. Fool that I was to plunge with such unsanctioned frenzy into mysteries no man was meant to penetrate. Fool or god he was, my only friend, who led me and went before me, who in the end passed into terrors which may yet be mine. There are no gods at 3 a.m. to stop you from eating half a block of cheese. Do you at least shred it or cut it? We met, I recall, in a railway station, where he was the center of a crowd of the vulgarly curious. He was unconscious, having fallen in a kind of convulsion which imparted to his slight black-clad body a strange rigid. I think he was then approaching 40 years of age, for there were deep lines in the face, wan and hollow-cheeked. Wan. And hollow-cheeked, but oval and actually beautiful, and touches of grey in the thick, waving hair and small full beard which had once been the deepest raven black. His brow was white as the marble of Pentelicus. And the height and breadth almost godlike. I said to myself, with all the ardor of a sculptor, that this man was a fawn statue out of antique Hellas, dug from a temple ruins and brought somehow to life in our stifling age, only to feel the chill and pressure of devastating years. And when he opened his immense, sunken, and wildly luminous black eyes, I knew he would thenceforth be my only friend. The only friend who had never possessed a friend before, for I saw that such eyes must have looked fully upon the grandeur and terror of realms beyond normal consciousness and reality. Realms which I had cherished in fancy, but vainly sought. So, as I drove the crowd away, I told him he must come with me and be my teacher and leader in unfathomed mysteries, and he assented without speaking a word. Afterward, I found that his voice was music, the music of vials. Vials in crystalline spheres. We talked often in the night, and in the day, when I chiseled busts of him and carved miniature heads in ivory to immortalize his different expressions. It is kind of hilarious. It's like way too funny. Yes, I can manage that. Give me a sec. Similar to the way there is a kind of shared universe aspect to Cthulhu mythos, Lovecraft referred to the works of other horror writers. That's so cool. Okay, yeah, I can do that. The music's gonna stop for a second. Yeah, I probably should have thought of that. I thought it might be funny to hear, but maybe it's too funny for this. Alright. Now let's do a test. You guys can't hear this, can you? Did you hear it? No? Okay, perfect. Of our studies, it is impossible to speak, since they held so slight a connection with anything of the world as living men conceive it. They were of that vaster and more appealing universe of dim entity and consciousness which lies deeper than matter, time, and space, and whose existence we suspect only in certain forms of sleep, those rare dreams beyond dreams which never come to common men, but once or twice in a lifetime of imaginative men. The cosmos of our waking knowledge, born from such an universe, as a bubble is born from the pipe of a jester, touches it only as such a bubble may touch its sardonic source when sucked back by the jester's whim. Men of learning suspect it little, and ignore it mostly. Wise men have interpreted dreams, and gods have laughed. One man with oriental eyes, okay, that's outdated, said that all time and space are relative, and men have laughed. But even that man with oriental eyes has done no more than suspect. I had wished and tried to do more than suspect, and my friend had tried and partly succeeded. Then we both tried together, and with exotic drugs, courted terrible and forbidden dreams in the tower studio chamber of old manor house in Hori Kent. Yeah, Dagoth, is that what he sounds like? Did the BGM go back up? It's not desktop audio anymore, so it might be slightly louder. Is that okay? Among the agonies of these after days is that chief of torments, inarticulateness. What I learned and saw in those hours of impious exploration can never be told, for want of symbols or suggestions in any language. I say this because, from first to last, our discoveries partook only of the nature of sensations. Sensations correlated with no impression, which the nervous system of normal humanity is capable of receiving. They were sensations, yet within them lay unbelievable elements of time and space, things which at bottom possess no distinct and definite existence. Human utterance can best convey the general character of our experiences by calling them plungings or soarings, for in every period of revelation, some part of our minds broke boldly away from all that is real and present, rushing aerially along shocking, unlighted, and fear-haunted abysses, and occasionally tearing through certain well-marked and typical obstacles, describable only as vicious, uncouth clouds or vapors. Viscous. Not vicious, my apologies. You wrote for the time in which he lived? Yes, it was like I said, outdated. In these black and bodiless flights, we were sometimes alone and sometimes together. When we were together, my friend was always far ahead. I could comprehend his presence despite the absence of form by a species of pictorial memory, whereby his face appeared to me, golden from a strange light and frightful with its weird beauty. Its anomalously youthful cheeks, its burning eyes, its Olympian brow and shadowing hair and growth of beard. Of the progress of time we kept no record, for time had become to us the merest illusion. I know only that there must have been something very singular involved, since we came at length to marvel why we did not grow old. Oh. Our discourse was unholy, and always hideously ambitious. No god or demon could have aspired to discoveries and conquests like those which we planned in whispers. I shiver as I speak of them, and dare not be explicit, though I will say my friend once wrote on paper a wish which he dared not utter with his tongue, and which made me burn the paper and look affrightedly out of the window and at the spangled night sky. I will hint, only hint, that he had designs which involved the rulership of the visible universe and more. Designs whereby the earth and the stars would move at his command, and the destinies of all living things be his. I affirm, I swear, that I had no share in these extreme aspirations. That guy wants to rule the world, eh? Anything my friend may have said or written to the contrary must be erroneous, for I am no man of strength to risk such unmentionable warfare in unmentionable spheres, by which alone one might achieve success. There was a night when winds from unknown spaces whirled us irresistibly into limitless vacua beyond all thought and entity. Perceptions of the most maddeningly untransmissible sort thronged upon us. Perceptions of infinity which at the time convulsed us with joy, yet which are now partly lost to my memory, and partly incapable of presentation to others. Viscous obstacles were clawed through in rapid succession, and at length I felt that we had been borne to realms of greater remoteness than any we had previously known. My friend was vastly in advance, as we plunged into this awesome ocean of virgin ether, and I could see the sinister exultation of his floating, luminous, too useful memory face. Suddenly, that face became dim and quickly disappeared, and in a brief space I found myself projected against an obstacle which I could not penetrate. It was like the others, yet incalculably denser, a sticky, clammy mass, if such terms can be applied to an analogous qualities in a non-material sphere. Hanging out with ether gods, getting the pyramid fist fights. I know. I don't know. Well, this says to SL, so I do wonder if this is also a fanfiction about someone, but I don't know who SL is, you know. I felt, been halted by a barrier which my friend and leader successfully passed. Struggling anew, I came to the end of the drug dream and opened my physical eyes to the tower studio, in whose opposite corner reclined the pallid and still unconscious form of my fellow dreamer, weirdly haggard and wildly beautiful, as the moon shed gold-green light on his marble features. Then, after a short interval, the form in the corner stirred, and may pitying heaven keep from my sight and sound another thing like that which took place before me. I cannot tell you how he shrieked, or what vistas of unvisitable hells gleamed for a second in the black eyes crazed with fright. I can only say that I fainted and did not stir till he himself recovered and shook me in his frenzy for someone to keep away the horror and desolation. This was the end of our voluntary searchings in the caverns of dream, odd, shaken, and portentous. My friend who had been beyond the barrier warned me that we must never venture within those realms again. Hang out with dream-weaving spiders and all the dreams I weave are very, very pleasant. They're nothing like this. What he had seen, he dared not tell me, but he said from his wisdom that we must sleep as little as possible, even if drugs were necessary to keep us awake. Oh my god! It's a nightmare on Elm Street. That he was right. I soon learned from the unutterable fear which engulfed me whenever consciousness lapsed. After each short and inevitable sleep, I seemed older, whilst my friend aged with a rapidity almost shocking. It is hideous to see wrinkles form and hair whiten almost before one's eyes, and this is like Stargate. Our mode of life is now totally altered. Heretofore a recluse so far as I know. His true name and origin never having passed his lips, my friend now became frantic in his fear of solitude. At night he would not be alone, nor would the company of a few persons calm him. His sole relief was obtained in the revelry of the most general and boisterous sort, so that few assemblies of the young and gay were unknown to us. Our appearance and age seemed to excite in most cases a ridicule which I keenly resented, but which my friend considered a lesser evil than solitude. Especially was he afraid to be out of doors alone when the stars were shining, and if forced to this condition, he would often glance furtively at the sky, as if haunted by some monstrous thing therein. He did not always glance at the same place in the sky. It seemed to be a different place at different times. On spring evenings, it would be low in the northeast. In the summer, it would be nearly overhead. In the autumn, it would be in the northwest. In the winter, it would be in the east, but mostly in the small hours of the morning. Midwinter evenings seemed least dreadful to him. Only after 2 years did I connect this fear with anything in particular. But I began to see that he must be looking at a special spot on the celestial vault, whose position at different times corresponded to the direction of his glance. A spot roughly marked by the constellation Corona Borealis. The first half of Lovecraft's works correspond mostly to his dreamlands era stories that revolve around dreams and visions of other worlds, and are heavily influenced by the dreams he had. I want to read more of those. Bandwagon fans only learned about Lovecraft after he sold out and entered his Cthulhu era. Did he sell out? This reminds you of the story of Nyarlathotep, but that's your fave. A lot of people love Nyarlathotep. We now had a studio in London, never separating, but never discussing the days when we had sought to plumb the mysteries of the unreal world. We were aged and weak from our drugs, dissipations, and nervous overstrain. And the thinning hair and beard of my friend had become snow white. Our freedom from long sleep was surprising, for seldom did we succumb to more than an hour or two at a time to the shadow which had now grown so frightful a menace. Then came one January of fog and rain, when money ran low and drugs were hard to buy. My statues and ivory heads were all sold, and I had no means to purchase new materials, or energy to fashion them, even had I possessed them. We suffered terribly, and on a certain night my friend sank into deep breathing sleep from which I could not awaken him. I can recall the scene now, the desolate, pitch-black garret studio under the eaves when the rain beating down, the ticking of a lone clock, the fancied ticking of our watches as they rested on the dressing table, the creaking of some swaying shutter in a remote part of the house, certain distant city noises muffled by fog and space, and worst of all, the deep, steady, sinister breathing of my friend on the couch, a rhythmical breathing which seemed to measure moments of supernal fear and agony for his spirit as it wandered in spheres forbidden, unimagined, and hideously remote. Yeah, there is an anime, yeah. I wonder how much of it was that Cthulhu Days. You guys, you will be able to listen. Corona Borealis, my friend exclaimed, at this time in this place, is this part of the country localized entirely within your drug realm. Yeah, really atmospheric. I'm really digging the vibes of this one. The tension of my vigil became oppressive, and a wild train of trivial impressions and associations thronged through my almost unhinged mind. I heard a clock strike somewhere. Not ours, for that was not a striking clock, and my morbid fancy found that in this a new starting point for idle wanderings, clocks, time, space, infinity. And then my fancy reverted to the local as I reflected that even now, beyond the roof and fog and the rain and the atmosphere, Corona Borealis was rising in the northeast. Corona Borealis, which my friend had appeared to dread, and whose scintillant semicircle of stars must even now be glowing unseen through the measureless abysses of ether. All at once, my feverishly sensitive ears seemed to detect a new and wholly distinct component in the soft medley of drug-magnified sounds. A low and damnably insistent whine from very far away, droning, clamoring, mocking, calling from the northeast. But it was not that distant whine which robbed me of my faculties and set upon my soul such a seal of fright as may never in life be removed. Not that which drew the shrieks and excited the convulsions which caused lodgers and police to break down the door. It was not what I heard, but what I saw. For in that dark, locked, shuttered, and curtained room there appeared from the black northeast corner a shaft of horrible red gold light, a shaft which bore with it no glow to disperse the darkness, but which streamed only upon the recumbent head of a troubled sleeper, bringing out in hideous duplication a luminous and strangely youthful memory face, as I had known it in dreams of abysmal space and unshackled time. But my friend had pushed behind the barrier to those secret, innermost, and forbidding caverns of nightmare. And as I looked, I beheld the head rise, the black, liquid, and deep sunken eyes open in terror, and the thin, shadowed lips part as if for a scream too frightful to be uttered. There dwelt in that ghastly, inflexible face, as it shone bodiless, luminous, and rejuvenated in the blackness, more of stark, teeming, brain-shattering fear than all the rest of heaven and earth has ever revealed to me. No word was spoken amidst the distant sound that grew nearer and nearer, but as I followed the memory face's mad stare along that cursed shaft of light to its source, the source whence also the memory came, I too, for an instant, saw what it saw, and fell with ringing ears in that fit of shrieking and epilepsy which brought the lodgers and the police. Never could I tell, try as I might, what it actually was that I saw, nor could this still face tell, for although it must have seen more than I did, it will never speak again. But always I shall guard against the mocking and insatiate Hypnos, Lord of Sleep, against the sky, and against the mad ambitions of knowledge and philosophy. Just what happened is unknown, for not only was my own mind unseated by the strange and hideous thing, but there were others tainted with forgetfulness, which can mean nothing if not madness. They have said, I know not for what reason, that I never had a friend, but that art, philosophy, and insanity had filled all my tragic life. The lodgers and police that night soothed me, and the doctor administered something to quiet me. Nor did anyone see what a nightmare event had taken place. My stricken friend moved them to no pity. But what they found on the couch in the studio made them give me praise which sickened me, and now a fame which I spurn in despair as I sit for hours, bald, grey-bearded, shriveled, palsied, drug-crazed, and broken, adoring and praying to the object they found. For they deny that I stole the last of my statuary, and point with ecstasy at the thing which is the shining shaft of light left cold, petrified, and unvocal. It is all that remains of my friend, the friend who led me onto madness and wreckage, a godlike head of such marble, and only Hellas could yield. Young with the youth that is outside time, and with beauteous bearded face, curved smiling lips, Olympian brow, and dense locks waving in poppy crown. They say that the haunting memory face is modeled from my own, as it was at 25, but upon the marble base is carved a single name in letters of Attica. What is that? Does anyone know how the frick to say that? Yupsilon Pinu Omicron Sigma. Yupsilon Pinu Omicron Sigma. Don't read that word. Oh, hypnos. I did put it in the bot. That's what the bot told me. Oh, hypnos. Oh, I summoned the being. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, you guys are in big trouble. Okay, the next story I have, I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee first, but this is called The Music of Eric Zahn. And these were all sent in by Buckles, by the way, so thank you so much. Yes, I summoned it. You love this one. Eric Zahn, who is that? First time I mean, we'll catch you in a while. Oh, welcome. I've examined maps of this city with the greatest care, yet I've never again found the Rue Docile. These maps have not been modern maps alone, for I know that names change. I have, on the contrary, delved deeply into all the antiquities of the place, and have personally explored every region of whatever name which could possibly answer to the street I knew as the Rue Docile. But despite all I have done, it remains a humiliating fact that I cannot find the house, the street, or even the locality where during the last months of my impoverished life as a student of metaphysics at the university, I heard the music of Eric Zahn. Just imagining the gathering card from way back called Hypnox, you realize it must be based on this stuff. I wonder if there's any other in the series. Or it moves the other player's hand, mind. Ooh. It's not clear that it was an untrustworthy narrator or the statue was really a manifestation. Yeah, like, is the guy crazy? Or was there possessed statue. That my memory is broken, I do not wonder, for my health, physical and mental, was gravely disturbed throughout the period of my residence in the Rue de Sile. I hope I'm saying that correctly, it's French. And I recall that I took none of my acquaintances there, but I cannot find the place again but that I cannot find the place again is both singular and perplexing, for it was within a half-hour's walk of the university and was distinguished by peculiarities which would hardly be forgotten by anyone who had been there. I have never met a person who's seen the Rue de Sile. The Rue de Sile lay across a dark river bordered by precipitous, black, bare-windowed warehouses and spanned by a ponderous bridge of dark stone. It was always shadowy along that river, as if the smoke of neighboring factories shut out the sun perpetually. The river was also odorous with evil stenches, which I had never smelled elsewhere, and which may someday help me to find it, since I should recognize them at once. Beyond the bridge were narrow cobbled streets with rails. Then came the ascent, at first gradual, but incredibly steep as the Rue de Sile was reached. Not black bare windows. That sounds cozy. I can't believe I said black bare windows. Brick blear windowed. What happened in my brain when I processed these words? Not black bare windowed. I was thinking bare windowed, like the windows were bare. I don't know, not like a barely animal. Brick blear windowed warehouses. Apologies. Your diction is unbearable. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. It's hard to read out loud, especially when it's someone who run-on sentences. Streamer debuff, I think, affects reading a little bit. Yeah, I'm like nervous, I've never seen another street as narrow and deep as the Rue de Sile. It was almost a cliff, closed to all vehicles, consisting in several places of flights of steps and ending at the top in a lofty, ivied wall. Its paving was irregular, sometimes stone slabs, sometimes cobblestones, and sometimes bare earth with struggling greenish-gray vegetation. The houses were tall, peaked-roofed, incredibly old, and crazily leaning backward, forward, and sidewise. Occasionally, an opposite pair, both leaning forward, almost met across the street like an arch, and certainly they kept most of the light from the ground below. There were a few overhead bridges from house to house across the street. The real horror of Lovecraft's syntax, yeah, he really goes on and on with those sentences. The other thing is, I also, I read in like a peculiar way a little bit. That's like optimized for reading things quickly in my head, but sometimes, it happens and I like, when I'm reading out loud too and accidentally skip words and things like that, so. Not they're being paid by the word of the real Eldritch. Yeah, because these are for magazines or whatever, right? Or like publications. The inhabitants of that street impressed me peculiarly. At first, I thought it was because they were all silent and reticent, but later decided it was because they were all very old. I do not know how I came to live on such a street, but I was not myself when I moved there. I had been living in many poor places, always evicted for want of money, until at last I came upon that tottering house in the Rue de Sile, kept by the paralytic Blandot. It was the third house from the top of the street, and by far the tallest of them all. Amiya is a manual-style reader, cursed to read Lovecraft for us needy buckles. I like it. I like trying to, I'm gonna get better at it, I think. But I like reading for you guys. It's just, it doesn't gel with my, method of reading, Oh, I'm up for pats always. My room was on the 5th story, the only inhabited room there since the house was almost empty. On the night I arrived, I heard strange music coming from the peaked garret overhead, and the next day I asked old Blando about it. He told me it was an old German viol player, a strange, dumb man who signed his name as Eric Zahn. Dumb in this context, by the way, means, I think, they can't speak? It's an old way to refer to that. And who played evenings in a cheap theater orchestra, adding that Zahn's desire to play in the night after his return from the theater was the reason he had chosen this lofty and isolated garret room, whose single gable window was the only point on the street from which one could look over the terminating wall at the declivity and panorama beyond. Mute, that's the word. Thereafter, I heard Zan every night, and although he kept me awake, I was haunted by the weirdness of his music. Knowing little of the art itself, I was yet certain that none of his harmonies had any relation to music I had heard before, and concluded that he was a composer of highly original genius. The longer I listened, the more I was fascinated, until after a week I resolved to make the old man's acquaintance. Hold on, my foot's asleep. One night, as he was returning from his work, I intercepted Zan in the hallway and told him that I would like to know him and be with him when he played. He was a small, lean, bent person with shabby clothes, blue eyes, grotesque satyr-like face, and nearly bald head. And at my first words, seemed both angered and frightened. My obvious friendliness, however, finally melted him, and he grudgingly motioned to me to follow him up the dark, creaking, and rickety attic stairs. His room, one of two in this deeply pitched garret, was on the west side, toward the high wall that formed at the upper end of the street. Its size was very great, and seemed the greater because of its extraordinary bareness and neglect. The furniture there was only a narrow iron bedstead, a dingy washstand, a small table, a large bookcase, an iron music rack, and 3 old-fashioned chairs. Sheets of music were piled in disorder about the floor. The walls were of bare boards, and probably had never known plaster, whilst the abundance of dust and cobwebs made the place seem more deserted than inhabited. Evidently, Ericsson's world of beauty lay in some far cosmos of the imagination. I thought it was the Hypnos. Nah, I was sitting on it. I was sitting on my foot. Motioning me to sit down, the dumb man closed the door, turned the large wooden bolt, and lighted a candle to augment the one he had brought with him. He now removed his vial from its moth-eaten covering and taking it, seated himself in the least uncomfortable of the chairs. He did not employ the music rack, but offering no choice in playing from memory, enchanted me for over an hour with strains I had never heard before. Strains which must have been of his own devising. To describe their exact nature is impossible for one unversed in music. They were a kind of fugue, with recurrent passages of the most captivating quality, but to me were notable for the absence in any of those weird notes I had overheard from my room below on other occasions. Those haunting notes I had remembered, and had often hummed and whistled inaccurately to myself, so when the player at length laid down his bow, and I asked him if he would render some of them, As I began my request, the wrinkled satyr-like face lost the bored placidity it possessed during the playing, and seemed to shew the same curious mixture of anger and fright which I had noticed when I first accosted the old man. For a moment I was inclined to use persuasion, regarding rather lightly the whims of senility, and even tried to awaken my host's weirder mood by whistling a few of the strains to which I had listened the night before. But I did not pursue this course for more than a moment. For when the dumb musician recognized the whistled air, his face grew suddenly distorted with an expression wholly beyond analysis, and his long, cold, bony right hand reached out to stop my mouth and silence the crude imitation. As he did this, he further demonstrated his eccentricity by casting a startled glance toward the lone curtained window, as if fearful of some intruder, a glance doubly absurd since the great garret stood high and inaccessible above all the adjacent roofs, this window being the only point on the steep street, as the concierge had told me, from which one could see over the wall at the summit. Stories like that one song you can never remember where it's from. Cooking? Yeah, it is. Bam, bam, bam. Some coffee. The old man's glance brought Blando's remark to my mind, and with a certain capriciousness, I felt a wish to look out over the wide and dizzying panorama of moonlit roofs and city lights beyond the hilltop, which, of all the dwellers in the Rue de Sale, only this crabbed musician could see. I moved toward the window and would have drawn aside the nondescript curtains, when with a frightening rage and even greater than before, the dumb lodger was upon me again, this time motioning with his head toward the door as he nervously strove to drag me thither with both hands. Now, thoroughly disgusted with my host, I ordered him to release me, and told him I would go at once. His clutch relaxed, and as he saw my disgust and offense, his own anger seemed to subside. He tightened his relaxing grip, but this time in a friendly manner, forcing me into a chair, and then, with an appearance of wistfulness, crossing to the littered table, where he wrote many words with a pencil in the labored French of a foreigner. The note which he finally handed me was an appeal for tolerance and forgiveness, Zan said that he was old, lonely, and afflicted with strange fears and nervous disorders. Oh, connected with his music and other things. He had enjoyed my listening to his music. Oh, that made me cry. I wished I could come again and not mind his eccentricities, but he could not play to another his weird harmonies and could not bear hearing them from another, nor could he bear having anything in his room touched by another. He had not known until our hallway conversation that I could overhear his playing in my room, and now asked me if I would arrange with Blando to take a lower room where I could not hear him in the night. He would, he wrote, defray the difference in rent. As I sat deciphering the execrable French, I felt more lenient towards the old man. He was a victim in physical and nervous suffering, as was I, and my metaphysical studies had taught me kindness. In this silence, there came a slight sound from the window. The shutter must have rattled the night wind, and for some reason I started almost violently, as did Eric Zan. So when I had finished reading, I shook my host by the hand and departed as a friend. That next day, Blando gave me a more expansive room on the 3rd floor, between the apartments of an aged moneylender and the room of a respectable upholsterer. There was no one on the 4th floor. It was not long before I found that Zan's eagerness for my company was not as great as it had seemed while he was persuading me to move down from the 5th story. He did not ask me to call on him, and when I did call, he appeared uneasily and played listlessly. This was always at night. In the day, he slept and would admit no one. My liking for him did not grow, though the attic room and the weird music seemed to hold an odd fascination for me. I had a curious desire to look out of that window over the wall and down the unseen slope of glittering roofs, at the glittering roofs and spires which must lie outspread there. Once I went up to the garret during theater hours when Zan was away, but the door was locked. What I did succeed in doing was to overhear the nocturnal playing of that dumb old man. At first, I would tiptoe up to my old 5th floor. Then I grew bold enough to climb the last creaking staircase to the peaked garret. There, in the narrow hall outside the bolted door with the covered keyhole, I often heard sounds which filled me with indefinable dread. The dread of vague wonder and brooding mystery. It was not that the sounds were hideous, for they were not, but that they held vibrations suggesting nothing on this globe of earth, and that at certain intervals they assumed a symphonic quality which I could hardly conceive as produced by one player. Certainly Eric Thom was a genius of wild power. As the weeks passed, the playing grew wilder, whilst the old musician acquired an increasing haggardness and furtiveness pitiful to behold. He now refused to admit me at any time, and shunned me whenever we met on the stairs. It's definitely eerie vibes, but nothing outwardly spooky yet, you know? So far, just a weird old man. Then, one night as I listened at the door, I heard the shrieking viol swell into a chaotic babble of sound. A pandemonium which would have led me to doubt my own shaking sanity had there not come from behind a barred portal with piteous proof that the horror was real. The awful, inarticulate cry, which only a mute can utter and which rises only in moments of the most terrible fear or anguish. I knocked repeatedly at the door but received no response. Afterward, I waited in the black hallway, shivering with cold and fear, till I realized the poor musician's feeble effort to rise from the floor by the aid of a chair. Believing him just conscious after a fainting fit, I renewed my rapping, at the same time calling out my name reassuringly. I heard Zan stumble to the window and close both shutter and sash, then stumble to the door, which he falteringly unfastened to admit me. This time his delight at having me present was real, for his distorted face gleamed with relief, while he clutched my coat as a child clutches at his mother's skirts. Haunted attic rooms on strange Paris streets. Yeah, maybe this street does not actually exist. The story is just Lovecraft hearing non-Western scales for the first time. That is Buckles. You guys love to clutch on my skirt when you're spooked, huh? Shaking pathetically, the old man forced me into a chair whilst he sank into another, beside which his viol and bowl lay carelessly on the floor. He sat for some time inactive, nodding oddly, but having a paradoxical suggestion of intense and frightened listening. Subsequently, he seemed to be satisfied, and crossing to a chair by the table, wrote a brief note, handed it to me, and returned to the table when he began to write rapidly and incessantly. The note implored me in the name of mercy and for my own sake, and for the sake of my own curiosity, to wait where I was while he prepared a full account in German of all the marvels and terrors which beset him. I waited, and the dumb man's pencil flew. It was perhaps an hour later. while I still waited and while the old musician's feverishly written sheets still continued to pile up, that I saw Zan start as from the hint of a horrible shock. Unmistakably, he was looking at the curtain window and listening shudderingly. Then I half fancied I heard a sound myself, though it was not a horrible sound, but rather an exquisitely low and infinitely distant musical note suggesting a player in one of the neighboring houses, or in some abode beyond the lofty wall over which I had never been able to look. Upon Zan, the effect was terrible, for dropping his pencil and suddenly he rose, seized his viol, and commenced to rend the light with the wildest playing I had ever heard from his bow, save when listening to it at the barred door. Yeah, grab on buckles. How we just agreed to we're doing karaoke next door. Oh, you silly, It would be useless to describe the playing of Eric Zahn on that dreadful night. It was more horrible than anything I had ever overheard, because I could now see the expression of his face and could realize that this time the motive was stark fear. He was trying to make a noise, to ward something off or drown something out. What, I could not imagine. Awesome though I felt it must be. The playing grew fantastic, delirious, and hysterical, yet kept to the last the qualities of supreme genius, which I knew the strange old man possessed. I recognized the air. It was a wild Hungarian dance popular in the theaters, and I reflected for a moment that this was the first time I had ever heard Zan play the work of another composer. That girl's doing karaoke again while we grill. Yeah, literally my neighbors, probably. That all the time. Louder and louder, wilder and wilder mounted the shrieking and whining of that desperate viol. The player was dripping with uncanny perspiration, and twisted like a monkey, always looking frantically at the curtain window. In his frenzied strains, I could almost see shadowy satyrs and bacchanals dancing and whirling insanely through the seething abysses of clouds and smoke and lightning. And when I thought I heard a shriller, steadier note that was not from the viol, a calm, deliberate, purposeful, mocking note far away in the west. At this juncture, the shutter began to rattle in the howling night wind, which had sprung up outside as if in answer to the mad playing within. Zan's screaming viol now outdid itself, emitting sounds I never thought a viol could emit. The shutter rattled more loudly, unfastened, and commenced slamming against the window. Then the glass broke shiveringly under the persistent impacts, and the chill wind rushed in, making the candle sputter and rustling the sheets of paper on the table where Zahn had begun to write out his horrible secret. I looked at Zahn and saw that he was past conscious observation. His blue eyes were bulging, glassy, and sightless, and the frantic playing had become a blind, mechanical, unrecognizable orgy that no pen could even suggest. A sudden gust, stronger than the others, caught up the manuscript and bore it towards the window. I followed the flying sheets in desperation, but they were gone before I reached the demolished panes. Then I remembered my old wish to gaze from this window, the only window in the Rue du Sile, from which one might see the slope beyond the wall and the city outspread beneath. It was very dark, but the city's lights always burned, and I expected to see them there amidst the rain and wind. Yet, when I looked from that highest of all gable windows, looked while all the candles sputtered and the insane viol howled with the night wind, I saw no city spread below, and no friendly lights gleaming from remembered streets, but only the blackness of space illimitable. Unimagined space alive with motion and music, and having no semblance to anything on earth. And as I stood there looking in terror, the wind blew out both candles in that ancient peaked garret, leaving me in savage and impenetrable darkness with chaos and pandemonium before me, and the demon madness of that night-baying viol behind me. I staggered back in the dark, without the means of striking a light, crashing against the table, overturning a chair, and finally going my way to the place where the blackness had screamed with shocking music. To save myself and Eric Zahn, I could at least try, whatever the powers opposed to me. Once I thought some chill thing brushed me, and I screamed, but my scream could not be heard above that hideous viol. Suddenly, out of the blackness, the madly swaying bow struck me, and I knew I was close to the player. I felt the head touch the back of Zahn's chair, then found and shook his shoulder in an effort to bring him to his senses. He did not respond, and still the viol shrieked on without slackening. I moved my hand to his head, whose mechanical nodding I was able to stop, and shouted in his ear that we must both flee from the unknown things of the night. But he neither answered me nor abated the frenzy of his unutterable music, while all through the garret strange currents of wind seemed to dance in the darkness and babble. When my hand touched his ear, I shuddered, though I knew not why till I felt the still face, the ice-cold, stiffened, unbreathing face whose glassy eyes bulged uselessly into the void. And then, by some miracle, finding the door and the large wooden bolt, I plunged wildly away from that glassy-eyed thing in the dark, and from the ghoulish howling of that accursed viol, whose fury increased even as I plunged. Leaping, floating, flying down those endless stairs through the dark house, racing mindlessly out into the narrow, steep and ancient street of steps and tottering houses, clattering down steps and over cobbles to the lower streets and putrid canyon-walled river, painting across the great dark bridge to the broader, healthier streets and boulevards we know. All these are terrible impressions that linger with me. And I recall there was no wind, and that the moon was out, and that all the lights of the city twinkled. Despite my most careful searches and investigations, I have never since been able to find the Rue d'Ossile. But I am not wholly sorry, either for this or the loss of undreamable abysses of the closely written sheets which alone could have explained the music of Erickson. Hi Brielle, can you help me? I'm trying to figure out if I'm saying this correctly. I know it's French, and I know it's the name of a street, but I'm not sure if I'm saying the street name correctly. It says Rue... Oh. It says Rue D'_AUSEIL. Hold on, I'll write it for you. I thought it was docile. Like that. I'm curious if I'm saying it wrong. I think I probably am, but Rue d'Ossile. Nothing outside the window but void. That was freaking spooky! Music ones are spooky to me. Dosai? Dose? Wait. Dose? Doseo? Dose? I wish I could explain how to pronounce it to you. That's okay, Brielle. I'm just, I was not close, right? Dose? Rue Dose. 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 Rue Dose. It's one of the stories Lovecraft is most proud of because it basically doesn't explain anything. No, it doesn't. It just paints a very spooky picture. Adult disease. You will never listen to viol music again. Is that different from a violin or a viola? Or I guess it's a different size. You know. Voice next door claimed to be a spy woman. Poof, shield for some reason. Can you read phonetic transcriptions? Probably not anymore. There was a time where I could. You mean like IPA? Being unable to pronounce French terms is default human behavior. Yeah, you guys, but I learned French in school for like 9 years. No, wait, it was 6 years. But they were not good classes in my defense. If it's IPA, I might be able to read it, but I don't remember how much of it I can read. I did learn it at one point. Okay, there's one more. It's pretty short. I think we can read this today. According to the top sources, the public Lovecraft wiki, Osei isn't a real French word anyways. You're probably pronouncing it better than Lovecraft. That doesn't matter though. It's still, you know, there's still a way to, you know, there's still the, like, spelling conventions that would be pronounced a certain way. Used to be different sizes of the same instrument. Violin, viola is a modern distinction. Oh, okay. Is the French who write words wrong? No. It's just a name. The last constants of a French word are always there to deceive you. I can't wait to see what Ponyboy and Soda Pop get up to. Oh my god, it's the Outsiders, right? Plural. Oh my god, I remember reading that in school. Yeah, I just want the approximation, yeah. I think, I can read one more before I gotta... I was gonna try and make a special model for my stream later, but... I don't know if I'll have time, but... At the very least, I can make a fun overlay. Flashbacks to Horse Devours. Or Nerves. French numbers are the worst. It's like doing math. Oh yeah, but I can't even remember. It's me. No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 9, 10. Wait, I don't even remember. The Outsider. At night, the Baron dreamt of many a woe, and all his warrior guests, with shade in form of witch and demon and large coffin worm, were long be nightmared. Keats. Unhappy is he to whom memories of childhood bring only fear and sadness. Wretched is he who looks back upon lone hours in vast and dismal chambers with brown hangings and maddening rows of antique books, or upon odd watches in twilight groves of grotesque, gigantic, and vine-encumbered trees that silently wave twisted branches far aloft. Such a lot the gods gave to me, the dazed, the disappointed, the barren, the broken, and yet I'm strangely content and cling desperately to those sear memories when my mind momentarily threatens to reach beyond to the other. Vent et une. What is that? Like, vent is it 20? But that one is no, I know it's weird. It's kinda like Japanese numbers, but I think Japanese numbers are way more straightforward. And consistent. I know not where I was born, save that the castle was infinitely old and infinitely horrible. Ooh, a castle! Full of dark passages and having high ceilings where the eye could only find cobwebs and shadows. The stones in the crumbling corridors seemed always hideously damp, and there was an accursed smell everywhere as of the piled up corpses of dead generations. It was never light, so that I used sometimes to light candles and gaze steadily at them for relief. I used to. It was never light, so that I used to sometimes to light candles and gaze steadily at them for relief. Nor was there any sun outdoors, since the terrible trees grew high above the topmost accessible tower. There was one black tower which reached above the trees into the unknown outer sky, but that was partly ruined and could not be ascended, save by a well-nigh impossible climb up the sheer wall stone by stone. The Smeal. Ooh, Chekhov's tower? I bet he's gonna climb that tower. I must have lived years in this place, but I cannot measure the time. Beings must have cared for my needs, yet I cannot recall any person except myself or anything alive but the noiseless rats and bats and spiders. I think that whoever nursed me must have been shockingly aged, since my first conception of a living person was that of something mockingly like myself, yet distorted, shriveled, and decaying like the castle. To me, there was nothing grotesque in the bones and skeletons that strode some of the stone crypts deep down among the foundations. I fantastically associated these things with everyday events, and thought them more natural than the colored pictures of living beings, which I found in many of the moldy books. From such books I learned that all that I know. No teacher urged or guided me, and I do not recall hearing any human voice in all those years, not even my own, for although I had read of speech, I had never thought to try and speak aloud. My aspect was a matter equally unthought of, for there were no mirrors in the castle, and I merely regarded myself by instinct as akin to the youthful figures I saw drawn and painted in the books. I felt conscious of youth because I remembered so little. Yeah, it's like doing math, literally. Where is this castle totally grown over by giant trees? I don't know, you would never see it, you know. An outsider might never see it. Mochas. Outside, across the putrid moat and under the dark mute trees, I would often lie and dream for hours about what I read in the books. I would longingly picture myself amidst gay crowds in the sunny world beyond the endless forest. Once I tried to escape from the forest, but as I went further from the castle, the shade grew denser and the air more filled with brooding fear, so that I ran frantically back lest I lose my way in a labyrinth of nighted silence. So through endless twilights I dreamed and waited, though I knew not what I waited for. Then in the shadowy silhouette of my longing for light grew so frantic that I could rest no more, and I lifted entreating hands to the single black ruined tower that reached above the forest into the unknown outer sky. And at last I resolved to scale the tower, fall though I might, since it were better to glimpse the sky and perish than to live on without ever beholding day. Smart. You're gonna see some weird stuff, I think. In the dank twilight, I climbed the worn and aged stone stairs till I reached the level where they ceased, and thereafter clung perilously to small footholds leading upward. Ghastly and terrible was that dead, stairless cylinder of rock, black, ruined, and deserted, and sinister with startled bats whose wings made no noise. But more ghastly and terrible still was the slowness of my progress. For climb as I might, the darkness overhead grew no thinner, and a new chill of haunted and venerable mold assailed me. I shivered as I wondered why I did not reach the light, and would have looked down had I dared. I fancied that night had come suddenly upon me, and vainly groped with one free hand for a window embrasure, that I might peer out and above, and try to judge the height I had attained. All at once, after an infinity of awesome, sightless crawling up that concave and desperate precipice, I felt my hand touch a solid thing, and I knew I must have gained the roof, or at least some kind of floor. In the darkness, I raised my free hand and tested the barrier, finding it stone and immovable. Then came a deadly circuit of the tower, clinging to whatever holds the slimy wall could give, till finally my testing hand found the barrier yielding, and I turned upward again, pushing the slab or door with my head as I used both hands in my fearful ascent. There was no light revealed above, and as my hands went higher, I knew that my climb for the nonce ended. Since the slab was the trapdoor of an aperture leading to a level stone surface of greater circumference than the lower tower, no doubt the floor of some lofty and capacious observation chamber. I crawled through carefully and decided to prevent the heavy slab from falling back into place. But failed in the latter attempt. As I lay exhausted on the stone floor, I heard the eerie echoes of its fall, but hoped, when necessary, to pry it open again. The door slammed shut! Believing I was now at a prodigious height, far above the accursed branches of the wood, I dragged myself up from the floor and fumbled about for windows, that I might look for the first time upon the sky and the moon and stars which I had read. But on every hand I was disappointed, since all that I found were vast shelves of marble, bearing odious oblong boxes of disturbing size. More and more I reflected and wondered what hoary secrets might abide in this high apartment, so many eons cut off from the castle below. Then unexpectedly my hands came upon a doorway, where hung a portal of stone, rough with strange chiseling. Trying it, I found it locked, but with a supreme burst of strength I overcame all obstacles and dragged it open inward. As I did so, there came to me the purest ecstasy I've ever known, for shining tranquility through an ornate grating of iron, and down a short stone passageway of steps that ascended from the newly found doorway was the radiant full moon, which I had never before seen save in dreams and vague visions I dared not call memories. Fancying now that I had attained the very pinnacle of the castle, I commenced to rush up the few steps beyond the door, but the sudden veiling of the moon by a cloud caused me to stumble, and I felt my way more slowly in the dark. It was still very dark when I reached the grating, which I tried carefully and found unlocked, but which I did not open for fear of falling from the amazing height to which I had climbed. Then the moon came out. Most demoniacal of all shocks is that of the abysmally unexpected and grotesquely unbelievable. Nothing I had before undergone could compare in terror to what I now saw, with the bizarre marvels that sight implied. The sight itself was as simple as it was stupefying, for it was merely this. Instead of dizzying prospect of treetops seen from lofty eminence, there stretched around me on a level through the grating nothing less than the solid ground, decked and diversified by marble slabs and columns, and overshadowed by an ancient stone church whose ruined spire gleamed spectrally in the moonlight. Half unconscious, I opened the grating and staggered out upon the white gravel path that stretched away in two directions. My mind, stunned and chaotic as it was, still held the frantic craving for light, and not even the fantastic wonder which had happened could stay my course. I never knew nor cared whether my experience was insanity, dreaming, or magic, but I was determined to gaze on brilliance and gaiety at any cost. I knew not who I was or what I was, or what my surroundings might be, though as I continued to stumble along I became conscious of a kind of fearsome latent memory that made my progress not wholly fortuitous. I passed under an arch out of that region of slabs and columns, and wandered through the open country, sometimes following the visible road, but sometimes leaving it to curiously tread across meadows, where only occasional ruins bespoke the ancient presence of a forgotten road. Once I swam across a swift river where crumbling, mossy masonry told of a bridge long vanished. Over 2 hours must have passed before I reached what seemed to be my goal, a venerable ivied castle in a thickly wooded park, maddeningly familiar, yet full of perplexing strangeness to me. I saw that the moat was filled in and that some of the well-known towers were demolished, whilst new wings existed to confuse the beholder. But what I observed with chief interest and delight were the open windows, gorgeously ablaze with light, and sending forth sound of the gayest revelry. Advancing to one of those, I looked in and saw an oddly dressed company, indeed, making merry and speaking brightly to one another. I had never seemingly heard human speech before, and could guess only vaguely what was said. Some of the faces seemed to hold expressions that brought up incredibly remote recollections. Others were utterly alien. I now stepped through the low window into the brilliantly lighted room, stepping as I did so from my single bright moment of hope to my blackest convulsion of despair and realization. The nightmare was quick to come, for as I entered, there occurred immediately one of the most terrifying demonstrations I had ever conceived. Scarcely had I crossed the sill when there descended upon the whole company a sudden and unheralded fear of hideous intensity, distorting every face and evoking the most horrible screams from nearly every throat. Flight was universal, and in the clamor and panic, several fell in a swoon and were dragged away by their madly fleeing companions. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, I don't like that. The crowds, tramplings and stuff. That stuff always bothers me a lot. I don't know why. Many covered their eyes with their hands and plunged blindly and awkwardly in their race to escape, overturning furniture and stumbling against the walls before they managed to reach one of the many doors. The cries were shocking, and as I stood in the brilliant apartment alone and dazed, listening to their vanishing echoes, I trembled at the thought it might be lurking near me unseen. At a casual inspection, the room seemed deserted, but when I moved toward one of the alcoves, I could detect a presence there. I thought I detected a presence there. Crowds are so dangerous. Yeah, it's really spooky. Way more dangerous than you think. I do have a crowd phobia. It's true. It's not. You're not wrong. A hint of motion beyond the golden arched doorway leading to another and somewhat similar room. As I approached the arch, I began to perceive the presence more clearly. And then, with the first and last sound I ever uttered, a ghastly ululation that revolted me almost as poignantly as the noxious cause. I beheld in full frightful vividness the inconceivable, indescribable, and unmentionable monstrosity which had by its simple appearance changed a merry company to a herd of delirious fugitives. Hold on. Have I ever been to a convention? I have. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. I have been to a convention, but not in many years. Okay. I cannot even hint what it was like, for it was a compound of all that is unclean, uncanny, unwelcome, abnormal, and detestable. It was the ghoulish shade of decay, antiquity, and desolation, the putrid, dripping eidolon of unwholesome revelation, the awful bearing of that which the merciful earth should always hide. God knows it was not of this world, or no longer of this world. Yet to my horror I saw in its eaten away and bone-revealing outlines a leering, aberrant travesty on the human shape, and in its moldy, disintegrating apparel an unspeakable quality that chilled me even more. I was almost paralyzed, but not too much so to make a feeble effort towards flight. A backward stumble, which failed to break the spell, in which the nameless, voiceless monster held me. My eyes bewitched the glassy orbs which stared loathsomely into them, refused to close, though they were mercifully blurred, and shewed the terrible object but indistinctly after the first shock. I tried to raise my hand to shut out the sight, yet so stunned were my nerves that my arm could not fully obey my will. The attempt, however, was enough to disturb my balance, so that I had to stagger forward several steps to avoid falling. As I did so, I became suddenly and agonizingly aware of the nearness of the carrion thing, whose hideous hollow breathing I half fancied I could hear. Nearly mad, I found myself yet able to throw out a hand to ward off the fetid apparition, which pressed so close when the one cataclysmic second of cosmic nightmarishness and hellish accident, my fingers touched the rotting, outstretched paw of the monster beneath the golden arch. I did not shriek, but the fiendish ghouls that ride the night wind shrieked for me, as in that same second there crashed down upon my mind a single and fleeting avalanche of soul-annihilating memory. I knew in that second all that I had been. I remembered beyond the frightful castle of the trees, and recognized the altered edifice in which I now stood. I recognized, most terrible of all, the unholy abomination that stood leering before me as I withdrew my sullied fingers from its own. But in the cosmos there is a balm as well as bitterness. And that balm is Nepenthe. In the supreme horror of that second, I forgot what had horrified me, and the burst of black memory vanished in a chaos of echoing images. In a dream, I fled from that haunted and accursed. In a dream, I fled from that haunted and accursed pile and ran swiftly and silently in the moonlight. When I returned to the churchyard place of marble and went down the steps, I found the stone trapdoor immovable. But I was not sorry. Thank you for the bludgeon skirt. I had where was I? When I returned to the churchyard place of marble and went down the steps, I found the stone trapdoor immovable, but I was not sorry, for I had hated the ancient castle and the trees. Now I ride with the mocking and friendly ghouls on the night wind, and play by day amongst the catacombs of Nefrin Ka, in the sealed and unknown valley of Hadoth by the Nile. I know the light is not for me, save that of the moon over the rock tombs of Neb, nor any gaiety save the unnamed feasts of Nitocris beneath the Great Pyramid. Yet, in my new wildness and freedom, I almost welcome the bitterness of alienage. For although Nepenthe has calmed me, I know always I am an outsider, a stranger in this century and among those who are still men. This I have known ever since I stretched out my fingers to the abomination within that great gilded frame, stretched out my fingers and touched a cold and unyielding surface of polished glass. Oh my god, it was a me! He's Nepenthe. Oh! Whoa, that's a great twist. Wow! Spooky! Alright guys, that's all the stories I have prepared for today. He was a Zambimbo. This might be the last reading stream for spooky season. I'm not sure if I'll do another one next week or if I'm gonna do something else, so this may be the last one, but it was very fun. And you know, I totally thought I was playing Bart's Nightmare today, but I'm actually not. I'm playing Ceremony of Innocence, which makes things a whole heck of a lot easier for me because I don't have to rush to like make a model and stuff, which is what I was gonna do for Bart's Nightmare. So, ay caramba, that was neat. It was neat, right? So thank you guys for joining me today, and I'll be streaming a little bit later. Thanks for more spooky stories this year, of course. And yeah, I'll be streaming a little bit later. I'm gonna attempt to do some Sydney, yeah. I'll be streaming a little bit later, and I'm gonna be playing a game called Ceremony of Innocence, which I think is about writing and poetry and literature and all that good stuff. So, but it's also a very strange game, kind of with some weird puzzles. So, maybe you guys would like it if you enjoyed this stream here today. So that is in about hour 45 minutes. Okay, so I'll see you guys then, and thank you. It's been a great spooky Halloween, and thank you guys for the stories. I really loved reading them. Alright, I'll see you guys in a bit. Otsukaresamiya. Oyasumiya. Bye bye. And I'm sorry my reading aloud is not the greatest. I need more practice, I think, so maybe I'll read more stories for you guys. Thanks for the readings, of course. Not easy material to read aloud, so it's appreciated. Yeah, that's the other thing. Enjoy bigly. Yay. Okay, thank you guys. Otsukaresamiya. Oyasumiya. Bye bye.